When you hear Stuart Young and Keith Rowley talk and Gary Griffith, I want you to understand that they have no idea what they're talking about. A man named Diosdado Cabello, who is the Justice Minister of Venezuela, put out a threat naming Trinidad and Tobago as a destination for invasion. That is what the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, who is defending our sovereignty, responded to. Mr. Diosdado Cabello is wanted by the United States as a fugitive and a drug lord, but that's not the purpose of this video. The purpose of this video is to let you understand that when a man sends a message that he is coming to your country to invade it, to engage in his own personal prosecution, and you are a sovereign nation, you are duty bound to protect your people, protect your country, and to respond. Kamla Persad's message was measured and it was appropriate. She told Maduro, and I want you to know why she's speaking to Maduro, because Venezuela is not a democracy. So if Diosdado Cabello had put out that information that Maduro didn't want in the public space, Cabello would have been fired or jailed or dead. That's how Venezuela, that's how life in Venezuela is. No, Cabello was speaking for Maduro, and Kamla had to respond to Maduro. And the message to Maduro is, listen, if any boats come into our waters on any nefarious activities, we will deal with them. Now, to the people who saying and want to put out memes about the Trinidad army versus the Venezuelan army, Guyana have more oil than God. And Guyana shares a land border with Venezuela. And Venezuela has been claiming Guyana longer than they've been claiming Trinidad. And it's easy to invade Guyana because it's just overland, down a road. You could take a taxi and invade it. So why haven't they? Because they know the minute they put God out their thoughts. You see, people telling you about Ukraine and Russia and Zelensky and Putin and things, all kind of nonsense to frame the narrative. Rowley and Stuart Young are lie good, lie well, lie big, and lie all the time. These fellas and Gary Griffith with his nonsense, he's had to go and research 3 and 4 times to come and make up a story to tell you. I want to tell you something. Zelensky and NATO and Russia and all of that is different to the Western Hemisphere. The United States of America claims the entire Western Hemisphere is an actual doctrine of protection. So no, Venezuela cannot put God out their thoughts to attack either Guyana or Trinidad and Tobago, because that is all the provocation the United States of America needs to put boots on the ground to invade Venezuela and change that regime, and Maduro knows that. So all the talk Maduro talking and all the talk Rowley and Stuart Young and the rest of Maduro's friends in Trinidad talking, ignore them. Kamla Persad-Bissessar was spot on. And all the people of Trinidad and Tobago are to ignore the 1% media that are trying to destabilize Kamla's government. Kamla Persad-Bissessar has a special majority. She has been given a mandate by the people to protect and fix this country. Stand with her. Ignore these band of fools and their nonsense trying to frame the narrative against her. Her message to Maduro was a proper response, and anybody who said different is not a patriot of Trinidad and Tobago.
We're coming back. We're coming back to claim our land.
Rebuttal of Phillip's statement on Trinidad and Tobago-Venezuela tensions. Phillip's statement presents a highly charged and partisan narrative regarding the recent diplomatic tensions between Trinidad and Tobago and Venezuela, specifically in response to threats allegedly made by Venezuelan Justice Minister Diosdado Cabello and the subsequent reaction by Prime Minister Kamla Persad-Bissessar. However, several aspects of his argument are logically unsound, misrepresent legal frameworks, and reflect a reckless approach to both law and responsible governance. 1. Mischaracterization of the legal and diplomatic context. Phillip frames the Venezuelan statements as an imminent military threat and characterizes Kamla Persad-Bissessar's response as both measured and exemplary. In reality, the Prime Minister's response was not a direct military threat, but a diplomatic warning emphasizing Trinidad and Tobago's sovereignty and the seriousness with which any incursion would be treated. She stated, TNT territory is off limits to them, and made clear that any unauthorized entry would be considered an act of aggression. However, she also acknowledged that there was no evidence to validate the Venezuelan accusations at that time. This demonstrates a more cautious and evidence-based approach than Phillip suggests, and it is inaccurate to portray her response as a call to arms or an unqualified stance of confrontation. 2. Overstatement of U.S. intervention doctrine. Phillip asserts that any Venezuelan military action against Trinidad and Tobago or Guyana would automatically trigger US military intervention due to a supposed doctrine covering the entire Western Hemisphere. While the US views the region as within its sphere of influence, Monroe Doctrine, there is no automatic legal or treaty-based guarantee that the US would respond militarily to every regional dispute or incursion. Recent tensions between Venezuela and Guyana, for example, have been met with diplomatic pressure, joint exercises, and calls for peaceful resolution, not automatic military intervention. This overstates the legal and practical realities of international relations and could mislead the public into a false sense of security. 3. Misuse of Trinidad and Tobago's legal framework. Trinidad and Tobago is a sovereign democratic state, as enshrined in its constitution. Its Defense Act provides for the establishment and operation of the Defense Force, which is responsible for protecting national sovereignty and territorial integrity. The Prime Minister's reference to consulting the Minister of Defense and Attorney General for advice on protections for our Coast Guard to use deadly force on any unidentified vessel entering TNT waters is consistent with legal obligations to defend the nation. However, Phillip's blanket endorsement of any and all aggressive rhetoric and his dismissal of dissent as unpatriotic is contrary to democratic principles and the rule of law. The law requires measured, proportionate, and evidence-based responses, not reckless escalation or the silencing of legitimate debate. For recklessness and partisan framing, Phillip's statement goes beyond supporting national sovereignty. He attacks critics, labels dissenters as not patriots, and urges the public to ignore media and opposition voices. This is a dangerous approach in a democracy where open debate and scrutiny of government actions are essential. The Constitution guarantees freedoms of expression and political participation. Furthermore, his framing of Kamla Persad-Bissessar's response as above reproach ignores the legitimate need for transparency, legal review, and proportionality in matters of national defense. The Prime Minister herself acknowledged the need for consultation and legal advice before any escalation. 5. International law and proportionality. International law, including the United Nations Charter, requires that states respond to threats or incursions in a manner that is necessary and proportionate. Any use of force must be justified, and preemptive or excessive responses can lead to international condemnation or escalation. Reckless rhetoric or policy, as endorsed by Phillip, risks violating these principles and undermining Trinidad and Tobago's standing in the international community. Conclusion. Phillip's statement is logically unsound and legally reckless. It overstates the likelihood of US intervention, misrepresents the nature of the Prime Minister's response, and dismisses the need for legal review and democratic debate. Responsible leadership requires measured, lawful, and transparent action, not partisan attacks or the suppression of dissent. Trinidad and Tobago's sovereignty is best protected by adherence to its constitution, laws, and international obligations, not by reckless rhetoric or misinformation.
Who don't want to hear it, or to hear it now? Venezuela is all around Trinidad. Tobago is not in that. You never hear Phillip come on air and talk about no shutdown in there. We are a loving country. We just keep harvest every Sunday. Everybody come by everybody. Venezuelan people just come by me and eat. They're going all in Roxborough today. You understand? Phillip never said nothing. And Tobago is a loving country. All who forget that thing, they leave Trinidad alone with that thing down there. You know, look close to them. You know, we like a little drumstick. You understand? Easy to nyam up. You understand? All who forget us. Forget us. We taking all in lovingly over.
America will come in and help all you.
Everywhere. You know far America is from Trinidad Tobago? Them Venezuelan people over and see Trinidad so. Is Trinidad over there? It's 6 hours to come down and them jet the taking in. Them fellas just coming on the shore mouth so boom boom boom. And back inside. Back inside. Why you crazy? But the ass is this bad. But hey. All you get back to all the right self, eh? All you get back to all the right self with that thing there. We cannot war them people there.
I'll tell you, I'll talk to the Prime Minister.
She? She went down there with them. Finally, and we up here on our own. We not on that. We studying autonomy. You understand? We studying that to get our own thing.
We don't have that troop in with a war thing there, boy. No man have one come on, Yeah, no man have weighing that. I know nothing there.
Yeah, the wall pay the back pay.
Oh, like that, yeah. Watch me. And next thing too, that thing that sign up with back pay money right now. You know, you studying the war there, we need back pay. And you know, use the boss. You know, you alone could bring cartel in the country anti-come. Anti-come, bring cartel, pay the people with back pay, so we will get to see the teacher. You know, if cartel come, that war, they're not going again. You know, if cartel come here. Penny and them going to concert, they forget all about that war there. Cartel is here. Old boss. Pay with the back pay and forget them chipping it.
With tensions growing between Trinidad and Venezuela, there's a lot of concerns and questions, so here's a basic rundown of events. Early June, the Maduro government accused Trinidad of being a gateway for terrorists into Venezuela. On the 6th of June, Venezuelan Justice Minister Trinidad Tobago held up his phone to identify a Trinidadian named Kamla and accused him of being involved in terrorist activities aimed at destabilizing Venezuela's government.
Giggs Kendall Jeron. Seguramente mañana sale que es un misionero.
Trinidad and Tobago's government have denied these claims, citing there's no evidence so far into the Maduro government's allegations. Prime Minister Kamla Persad-Bissessar strongly rejected these allegations, stating further that any incursion into Trinidadian territory will be taken seriously and any vessels carrying military-age individuals from Venezuela will be met with deadly force. The Venezuelan government subsequently stated that the now criminals of Trinidadian origins have confessed their plans, and the government reiterates further that any legitimate concerns must be diplomatic, condemning Bissessar's hostilities. These are some facts about both countries. Venezuela's military force includes an estimated 343,000 individuals. That would be roughly 1/4 of Trinidad's entire population. Trinidad and Tobago's defense force includes roughly 5,500 to 10,000 personnel. There are an estimated 45,000 Venezuelan nationals living in Trinidad. However, there are many of the opinion that Trinidad will be a proxy for the United States in the event of war. Hopefully tensions ease between the two nations. I'm not sure anyone can rightfully say that they want war to be added to the list of their country's problems.
Justificada de la primera ministra de Trinidad y Tobago, Kamla Persad-Bissessar, en respuesta a una denuncia legítima formulada por el presidente Nicolás Maduro Moros sobre la entrada de elementos criminales desde el territorio trinidense hacia Venezuela. Venezuela ha capturado a criminales de origen trinitario quienes han confesado sus planes. Declaraciones que han sido debidamente sustentadas con pruebas contundentes presentadas por las autoridades competentes. Lo procedente ante esta grave situación es ofrecer cooperación y disposición para esclarecer los hechos. La actitud virulenta y altisonante de la primera ministra levanta serias sospechas de complicidad con dicha incursión y compromete las buenas relaciones de cooperación que existen entre nuestros países en áreas fundamentales. Venezuela exhorta a las autoridades de Trinidad y Tobago a no prestarse a juegos geopolíticos ajenos a los intereses de nuestros pueblos y reafirma su compromiso con la paz, la soberanía y el respeto mutuo, recordando que cualquier preocupación legítima debe canalizarse por las vías diplomáticas, no mediante amenazas ni declaraciones infundadas que solo alimentan tensiones artificiales. Caracas, 6 de junio de 2025.
Argument: the recklessness of Kamla Persad-Bissessar's statement. Kamla Persad-Bissessar's recent statements regarding Venezuela's allegations and her government's response can be characterized as ruthless, that is, lacking in caution, restraint, and diplomatic prudence. This approach not only risks escalating tensions but also undermines established legal and diplomatic norms. 1. Premature threat of deadly force without evidence. Persad-Bissessar declared that any unauthorized vessel from Venezuela entering Trinidad and Tobago's waters would be met with deadly force, despite openly admitting that there was no evidence to validate the Venezuelan claims of Trinidadian involvement in destabilizing activities. This stance is reckless because the Defense Act and international law require that the use of force, especially deadly force, be a last resort and proportionate to a real, imminent threat, not a hypothetical or unsubstantiated one. Declaring a policy of deadly force against any unidentified vessel risks harming innocent civilians, fishermen, or migrants, and exposes the country to legal and humanitarian backlash. 2. Escalation over diplomacy. Instead of prioritizing diplomatic engagement, Persad-Bissessar's rhetoric was confrontational. TNT territory is off-limits to them, and she warned of the Coast Guard's readiness to use deadly force. Former National Security Minister Stuart Young criticized this as the height of irresponsibility and arguably borderline insanity, urging instead for proper diplomatic communications with Venezuela. Reckless threats can jeopardize ongoing and future diplomatic relations, as Venezuela itself warned that her statements could compromise TT-Venezuela relations. Undermine regional stability, especially given the proximity and interconnectedness of the two countries. 3. Ignoring practical realities and legal due process. Persad-Bissessar's posture assumes Trinidad and Tobago has the surveillance and enforcement capacity to reliably identify and intercept every vessel entering its waters, which is not supported by operational realities. Radar systems have blind spots, and innocent vessels could easily be misidentified, leading to tragic consequences. The law requires that any enforcement action be based on clear evidence and due process, not on broad, unsubstantiated threats. Her government's own national security minister confirmed there was no evidence of illegal activity involving TNT vessels heading to Venezuela. 4. Risking economic and security interests. Reckless threats can have direct economic and security repercussions. Trinidad and Tobago's energy sector and broader economy are closely tied to regional stability and good relations with Venezuela. Escalating tensions unnecessarily could endanger energy negotiations and cross-border projects, invite retaliatory actions or diplomatic isolation. 5. Contradicting principles of responsible governance. Responsible governance demands measured, evidence-based responses to international incidents. Persad-Bissessar's approach, issuing threats in the absence of evidence and dismissing diplomacy, contradicts these principles and exposes the country to unnecessary risk. Conclusion. Kamla Persad-Bissessar's statements were reckless because they threatened deadly force without substantiated evidence of a real threat, prioritized confrontation over diplomacy, risking regional stability, ignored operational and legal realities, risking harm to innocents, endangered Trinidad and Tobago's economic and security interests, contradicted the standards of responsible, lawful governance. Such an approach is not only ruthless but dangerous, and it is imperative that national leaders act with restraint, legal fidelity, and diplomatic skill in matters of international dispute.